So the next part, we're going to take a look at how to rough out the mouth and the chin. So we're going to gather up some clay and roll it. And like I said, if the clay is wet, if it has dried to leather hard, you will need to scratch, add water, and attach your clay on. But my clay is pretty moist, so I'm not going to need to scratch and attach. You can see the head is quite flexible, and I can actually reshape it with my hands. It's so flexible. I didn't let it dry out. But if yours is dry, make sure you scratch, add water, and attach. Now, it's also really important to add some clay for the cheeks. So I added clay for the lips, and especially if you want to make a smile. Well, any expression really, you need to add some cheekbones to the person. Otherwise, their face will look like it's sagging. We have bones right under our eyes that are called the cheekbones. So it's right above where your jaw attaches to your skull. So you're going to want to roll some balls and add some clay in those areas. Remember, we're using an additive technique, so you need to continue to add clay to your sculpture in order to model it and form it to make it look like the expression you want to make. Right now, I'm actually drawing the lines from the edge of the nostrils under those cheekbones because my person is going to be smiling. So I want to indicate that line that occurs when you're making a smiling face. Shaping and forming the cheeks depending on what expression you're trying to make. So now I'm going to take some clay and add it to the chin. Again, you'll want to scratch, add water, and attach if your clay is leather hard, but mine is soft, so I can just add it on. And it's really important that you add clay for the chin. Depending on what expression you're trying to make, you want to add more or less. If you're going to have an open mouth, you might want to make that open mouth and add the chin on. Here I'm going to kind of add a little bit of shape to the lips, just so I can start looking at what shape I want to make them. And I'm using my modeling tool to press into the top lip and then press into the center of where the lips come together so that I can start to shape the bottom lip. So it's really, your modeling tools are going to be critical for this part of modeling the lips. And it's going to take time. I'm not adding too many details right now, just kind of roughing them out and starting to think about the expression that I'm trying to make. My clay is very wet and flexible right now. It's kind of collapsing on itself. So I'm going to have to wait till it dries out a little bit more to add more detail to those lips and to the center part of the lips. So right now, I really am just roughing it out, trying to start making that smile, those curving lips that are kind of curving up at the end and into the cheeks. You can see it's starting to smile. Next, we're going to add some eyelids. So I'm just taking a little bit of clay and I'll roll it into a little coil. So I'm just going to roll it on the table into a little coil and flatten it out between my fingers. When I get it to the thickness that I want, probably pretty thin. You don't want your eyelids too thick. Then I'm just going to place them on top of the eyes and start to attach them. Try to use the same amount of clay on both eyelids. and check to see if they're symmetrical. Then do the same thing for the lower eyelid. You'll probably use a little less clay for this one, so roll it out into a thinner coil and flatten it out between your fingers. Now you might need to use some modeling tools too, depending on how big your eyelids are. But for me, I'm just using my fingers. Here's where I have to use the modeling tool. My fingers are just too big to get into those little creases where the eyelids are. And I want to make sure they're attached. So I'm going to take the small end of the modeling tool and just smooth that into my clay. It's going to look a little rough at first, but I'll refine it later. You can draw the line where the two eyelids kind of come together. And because I'm making a smile, there's going to be a little bit of a smile crease right there where that happens when you're smiling. So you have to look at the expression that you're making and adjust the eyes and the eyebrows and the wrinkle between the eyebrows depending on what you're making. There's lots of different ways to make an eye. You can add this little bit of clay before you put the eyelids on. I just realized I needed that clay on there, so I'm going to add it now. Because you have a little extra flesh kind of maybe in between there, depending on what kind of face you're making.